So, Warner Brothers and Netflix just released a brand new Fullmetal Alchemist movie, and in keeping with the proud tradition of Fullmetal Alchemist movies, it's fucking terrible. Yay! I could go off on this movie for, so many things. The 90s caliber CGI. The lackluster production design that leaves every set looking like a set and every costume looking like a costume, with no sense of period authenticity or realistic wear and tear. The terrible wigs they put on the child actors, the terrible child actors they put in those wigs, or fucking gluttony. But I don't want to nitpick this movie to death, because while it does have plenty of technical flaws to tear apart, it suffers from a much more substantial underlying problem. It's exactly the kind of adaptation that we nerds so often say we want to see in the wake of films like Death Note, a mostly straightforward copy of the original story with a slavish devotion to recreating the most iconic visuals in that story. And like Ghost in the Shell and Batman vs. Superman before it, it serves as an excellent example of why this approach to adaptation almost invariably fails. When you look at how FMA the movie is laid out in comparison to the original manga and anime, it becomes clear what mandate the screenwriters were given in composing the film's script: to cram as many iconic FMA moments as possible into a 2-hour runtime and leave off on a big climax without giving away too much in case the movie makes enough money to get a sequel. In 2 hours and 15 minutes, Fullmetal Alchemist covers, in this order, which is not the canon order, Ed and Al's origin story, the Lior incident, the Shou Tucker arc, the search for Dr. Marco, Al's existential crisis, the murder of Maze Hughes, the assault on the Fifth Laboratory, the homunculus zombie army, zomunculi, I guess, and the death of Lust. FMA Brotherhood dedicates 9 episodes, a little over 3 hours, most of them somewhat rushed, to the bulk of those plot points, while the zomunculi are a major factor in the entire last act of the story. FMA 2003 takes 11 episodes, almost 4 hours, to cover the same subject matter, and those last 2 plot points aren't even in the original series. This means that events are condensed for time, and condensed really badly at that. The worst offender is the death of Trisha Elric at the start of the film, which is set up and concluded in under 2 minutes. Hi kids, real proud of your alchemy. Bye kids, forever. Alright bro, let's Frankenstein this bitch. Also, just as an aside, this movie commits one of the cardinal filmmaking sins in this first scene. The score lies to the audience. The music playing as the brothers transmute their toy horses is some super tense horror movie bullshit, while the scene itself is really cute and wholesome for about 40 seconds until she dies. I really don't get the point of creating this dissonance. It's not funny, it doesn't add anything to the plot, the film doesn't otherwise treat alchemy as anything scary, it's just really out of place. And there are lots of other moments where the music in the film feels like it was lifted from a different film or some sort of Creative Commons music library and just grafted onto FMA randomly. But moving back to that death, the problems with it carry through to every major plot point that the film tries to recreate. After the boys start trying to bring back their mom and get Wizard of Oz out of their house because the filmmakers couldn't think of a more interesting way to do the Door of Truth scene, we abruptly cut to Ed chasing Father Cornello through the back streets of Lior. And okay, look, I'm not opposed to the idea of this arc being used as an in medias res, here's what James Bond was up to before the actual mission started deal, but the execution here is really hackneyed and fundamentally undermines what made Cornello an interesting, threatening villain in the first place. Let's put aside the fact that this actually would have been a much better place to start the movie than the rushed prologue, and that's not the only sign that this movie is an editing hack job. Why in the hell is Cornello running from the boys in the first place? In the original, he had them on the ropes the whole time right up until they beat him. Cornello is a goddamn cult leader. He shouldn't be skulking in back alleys, and he certainly shouldn't run into a crowded town square to take a hostage. He should be proudly out in the open, rallying the townspeople to murder the Elric brothers as heretics. The whole fucking point of his character is to demonstrate the frightening, manipulative aspects of religion, one of the underlying themes of the series' entire plot. Here we have literally no context for why the people think that he's a good guy in the first place, or why they'd listen to Envy disguised as him and start rioting on his orders. Shit, we don't even know why the boys are chasing him. And by having them simply run him down and catch him with force instead of tricking him into exposing himself as a charlatan, we lose an opportunity for Ed to show off how clever he is. Which is another running problem for this movie. Live-action Ed isn't exactly some brilliant alchemic prodigy. Rather, he's led by the nose to every major discovery by another character. Tucker points him in the direction of Dr. Marco, Hughes discovers the location of the fifth laboratory, and as a result of that, Ed never figures out how Philosopher's Stones are made until Tucker spells it out for him in his villain speech. Ed's intelligence is his single most defining trait. It's both what gets him into trouble and what gets him out of it. It makes him cool, and the fact that intelligence is the main character's greatest weapon is a big part of what makes FMA cool, at least for nerds like me. Taking that away is the last thing that any FMA adaptation should ever do, but the movie has to do it that way because smart investigation scenes take time and require on-screen development to be believable, and they've still got to cram like 8 more iconic FMA moments in for the trailer. I mean, who's gonna watch an FMA movie where lust doesn't get lit on fire a whole arc too early and the whole thing with Shou Tucker doesn't happen? Shit, they didn't even have time to put Führer King Bradley in the movie. But no, that's definitely an artistically driven choice and not a transparent bid to leave a spot open for casting a popular actor if they get a sequel greenlit. Just like it's totally an artistic choice to write Al, the only character who's entirely CGI, out of like half the scenes that he's supposed to be in. See, this is the problem with being faithful to the original and trying to please the fans. Hardcore fans are naturally going to get excited about seeing, say, a live-action Nina Chimera or a live-action version of Lust and Mustang. So if a marketing executive is running the show, they're going to say, you have to put those parts in, but they may not be the best fit if the goal is to tell a good story, or even if the goal is to execute on those moments in a satisfying manner. I mean, the Shou Tucker story is rushed as hell in Brotherhood, but at least it's a story. In the live-action movie, the boys go to the Tucker residence, play with Nina and Alexander for all of 30 seconds, and then Ed sits down for a conversation with Tucker where he mostly just explains his backstory, which sets up an awkward as hell dream flashback sequence where Ed relives the incident at the Door of Truth, but this time he's a teenager, and my only guess as to why it was done this way is because the child actor they picked for Ed was so shitty that he just wasn't capable of carrying such a pivotal scene. Seriously, what happened to those kids from the Erase drama? They were great. Put them in more movies. Sorry, I got a bit sidetracked there, but hey, that's exactly what this movie does too. Tucker then sends Ed and Winry to find Dr. Marco while he's busy hypnotizing Al because reasons. On the train, Winry reminds Ed to have a flashback about how much Nina likes him because otherwise the audience wouldn't know that they're supposed to care about her, and they couldn't find time to organically work that scene into the actual story. They also talk to Dr. Marco for all of 2 minutes before Lush shows up and kills him in front of them, which doesn't make much sense. Then they go back to the city and oh shit, Nina's a chimera now, and Ed's gotta punch Tucker in the least convincing way ever. Now Nina's sad, okay, it's over. There's no build-up, no time to get invested in or attached to these characters. The only way that anyone is going to care about any of this is if they've seen or read FMA before, because it will remind them of a thing that made them sad. But this version of that thing is incapable of making anyone sad, because it's so rushed and poorly handled. If all you care about is a movie being visually accurate to the comic or anime, then sure, this is almost a one-for-one translation of that scene. And that is cool to see on the big or small screen, just like it was cool to see parademons show up in Batman vs. Superman. But that doesn't stop the movie underneath those nice visuals and accurate references from being half human, half dog shit. In the anime and manga, you have time to come to care for Nina and even for Tucker. You see the desperation start to break him and hope nothing bad will happen, even though it slowly becomes inevitable that something bad will. His betrayal is devastating and frighteningly understandable at the same time. In the movie, it actually straight up doesn't make any sense. Alright, so in Fullmetal Alchemist, the movie, the boys don't study under Tucker for their alchemy exams. They're sent to his house by General Hakuro to give them a leg up in searching for the Philosopher's Stone. At least ostensibly. In reality, Hakuro's goal is to separate the brothers so that Tucker can experiment on Al and find out how he works, while Ed is sent off either to go on a wild goose chase or to find Dr. Marco so that Lust can assassinate him. This isn't directly stated, but it's at least implied by the fact that Hakuro and Tucker are working together, and it's the only way that any of the film's events even remotely make sense. Hakuro needs to figure out how Al's soul bonding works so that he can bond Philosopher's Stones into his Zamunculi army, which he needs to do so that all of the characters aside from Mustang have something to do in the climax. So, given that Shou Tucker is directly working with a superior officer to make a scientific breakthrough that will theoretically benefit the military, why is he so worried about his job security that he's willing to sacrifice his only daughter for a science experiment again? Like, Tucker doesn't just turn Nina into a chimera because he's crazy and evil, he does it because he's desperate, really desperate. Again, the movie is missing the whole fucking point of a major villain. Tucker's supposed to serve as a warning of what happens when you get too obsessed with science. If you get so caught up in your work and your lifestyle that you forget that it's all ultimately for humanity and for your family. He is the scientific equivalent of Cornello, a mirror of what Ed could become if he gets too desperate or obsessed and loses sight of what's important. And he can't serve that vital narrative purpose if he's just a crazy fucking asshole who kills his only daughter for no fucking reason. The other villains don't fare much better either. Hakuro is just the nice guy who is secretly evil, and his only purpose in the plot seems to be to pull these levers so that the final battle can happen. Lust is just like an evil lady. They completely omit or play down all of her sexual relationships with the men that she kills, again, the whole fucking point of her character, and when she dies, she's happy about it because I honestly couldn't tell you. Envy is there, his costume is really good, he doesn't do much except for pretend to be some people unconvincingly, and that sucks because anyone who's seen FMA knows that he's arguably the best villain in the whole show. He shouldn't be a sidekick to Lust, that's Gluttony's job. And speaking of him, oh Gluttony, what did they do to you? None of these characters are given any real weight in the story. They're just there being evil because a plot has to happen. And the movie has more villains than fucking Amazing Spider-Man 2, so they have to be evil very quickly at that. Honestly, I was half expecting Cornello to come back in a rhino suit at the end. And naturally, this lack of development isn't just a problem for Ed and the villains. Almost every supporting character gets the short end of the stick as well. Hughes is the closest to his manga counterpart, and he gets exactly one scene of being a good dad / husband, and one scene of being kinda smart before he's killed off. Ross and Hawkeye are again just kinda there, and I actually don't know what purpose Ross serves since Mustang takes her entire role in the plot. Oh yeah, Mustang ends up being framed for Hughes' murder, which is, well, dumb on a lot of levels since Mustang is supposed to be a sacrifice, and those are still very much a thing in this version of the story. Weirder still, the movie frames it in such a way that it seems like we're supposed to believe that Mustang actually is the killer, except the movie also expects the entire audience to have seen FMA, so that twist doesn't really work. And even if it did work, it lasts for all of 7 minutes, like every other plot point in this stupid fucking movie. We don't even have time to acclimatize to a world where maybe Mustang is the killer before it's revealed through some very sloppy editing that he's not. They also waste a lot of screen time doing that thing where Al gets all sulky because he thinks he's a fake, which makes even less sense here than it did in the manga or anime, since the doubt is sown in his mind by Tucker instead of Barry, who's another suit of armor and therefore would have a reason to shake up his personality Anyway, it really is just an excuse to have them fight in an empty warehouse to break up the story, but it's also like literally all of the development that Al ever gets in the movie. Look, I could keep banging on about this forever, but the point is, while it may hit many of the same plot points as the manga and copy its visuals, this movie contains none of FMA's heart. The characters are flat and wrong, the message of the story is non-existent, and the plot doesn't hold up under scrutiny. And I think the underlying cause of this, ironically, is a push to adhere too closely to the source material. The writers were clearly allowed to shuffle things around to fit the runtime of a movie, but from the final product, it looks like they weren't allowed to include anything new or change any of the key scenes that were seemingly mandated for inclusion. I would honestly rather watch the Netflix Death Note movie again than something like this. That movie's not very good, it's definitely not faithful, but at least it was directed by someone with their own story to tell and hit some of the original's core themes. FMA is just another written by committee hodgepodge of meaningless fan service meant to milk an existing fan base for money and set up a sequel. And it really sucks to see my favorite anime turned into something like that. You can make a good movie out of FMA, maybe even a great one. The pieces are there, but you can't do it by running down a top 20 list of most badass FMA Brotherhood moments and cramming all the ones from the first quarter of the series into one incoherent jumble. The soul of the work is always what's most important in adaptation, and a good filmmaker would be able to identify that soul and build something new and distinct to their vision around it. I hope FMA gets that someday. Hell, maybe they can give this movie the Brotherhood treatment too. I'm Geoff Thew, professional shitbag, signing out from my mother's basement.